Before the foundations of the great mountain ranges were cast into the deep, or the first light of a distant sun had pierced the primordial gloom, there existed only the intentional breath of the divine, hovering over a canvas of absolute potentiality, where life was not yet a heartbeat, but a whisper in the mind of the infinite Creator. This is the threshold of the human story, a moment etched into the very limestone of our history, where the dust of the earth and the spirit of the heavens collided to form the first man, Adam. The silence of the newborn world was absolute, heavy with the scent of damp earth and the mist that rose like a shroud from the untouched soil, curling around the vibrant flora of a landscape that had never known a human footprint. In the center of this pristine theater, the Creator knelt, his hands moving with a deliberate and terrifying precision as he gathered the red clay, the very elements of the ground, into a form that was perfectly symmetrical, yet utterly hollow. There was no sound but the shifting of the grit and the soft press of divine fingers molding the bridge of a nose, the curve of a rib, and the intricate architecture of a hand that would one day reach for the stars. Every grain of soil was placed with a purpose that transcended mere chemistry, as the dust began to resemble the likeness of the unseen, a masterpiece of biological complexity waiting for the spark of animation to ignite the cold flesh. The tension in the garden was palpable, a cosmic holding of breath as the physical vessel lay finished upon the grass, a statue of potentiality that bridged the gap between the mundane earth and the majestic heights of the celestial realms. We stand at the precipice of this miraculous transition, where the silence of the mud is about to be shattered by the first intake of life-giving oxygen and the awakening of a consciousness that would change the trajectory of the universe forever. If the weight of this ancient mystery stirs something within your soul, perhaps you might consider sharing this journey with another seeker of truth. The form of the first man lay still, a silent testament to the craftsmanship of the Almighty, with every vein and artery mapped out like a dry riverbed awaiting the sudden rushing torrent of the first heartbeat. It was a scene of profound stillness, where the gold of the afternoon sun filtered through the canopy of Eden to rest upon the closed eyelids of a creature that did not yet know its own name or the glory of its surroundings. Then the Creator leaned down, moving closer than the stars to the earth, and breathed into the nostrils of the clay the breath of life, a divine exhalation that carried the weight of eternity into the lungs of the dust. In that singular, explosive moment, the dry riverbeds of the veins were flooded with crimson fire. The lungs expanded with a sharp, ragged gasp of the morning air, and the heart struck its first rhythmic chord against the walls of the chest. The eyes of Adam snapped open, reflecting the vibrant greens of the garden and the blinding blue of the firmament, as the neural pathways of his brain ignited with the sudden, overwhelming awareness of existence. He was no longer a sculpture of soil. He was a living soul, a being of dual nature, half anchored to the heavy elements of the world and half animated by the ethereal spirit of the living God. This transformation marks the definitive beginning of the human experience, a convergence of biology and divinity that defies simple explanation and demands a deeper investigation into the historical and cultural echoes of our earliest origins. As we move from the cinematic mystery of the garden into the hard evidence of the ancient record, the story of Adam begins to take on the weight of a verifiable reality. When we examine the textual foundations of this event in the book of Genesis, we find that the language used is remarkably specific and carries deep archaeological and cultural resonance within the ancient Near East. According to the NIV, the Lord God formed a man from the dust of the ground and breathed into his nostrils the breath of life. And the man became a living being, a description that uses the Hebrew word yatzor, which specifically refers to the work of a potter shaping clay on a wheel. This imagery was not unique to Israel. The surrounding cultures, such as the Egyptians and Babylonians, also possessed creation myths involving the molding of humans from earth. Yet the biblical account stands distinct in its theological implications. In the Egyptian Kum myth, the ram-headed god is depicted at a potter's wheel, creating humans, But the Genesis account strips away the polytheistic chaos, presenting a singular, sovereign act of divine will that elevates the dust to a position of stewardship. Archaeologically, the dust or aphar mentioned in the text refers to the fine, dry soil of the Levant, which contains the essential minerals carbon, nitrogen, and oxygen that we now know comprise the human body. This reflects an ancient understanding of our biological continuity with the planet that is strikingly consistent with modern chemical analysis, suggesting that the writer of Genesis was describing a fundamental physical truth. The transition from the dust to the nefesh hayah, or living soul, signifies a jump in complexity that the ancient world recognized as the defining characteristic of humanity. If this intersection of ancient text and physical reality intrigues you, feel free to subscribe as we continue to unearth the layers of our shared past. Standing for the first time, Adam felt the cool grass beneath his feet and the rush of a wind that seemed to whisper through the trees of the garden. A sensory symphony that flooded his newly awakened mind with 1,000 questions and a singular sense of wonder. He moved with a fluid grace that had never been practiced, his muscles responding to the commands of a spirit that was still learning the boundaries of its physical cage, reaching out to touch the bark of a tree and marveling at the texture of the living world. The Garden of Eden was not merely a backdrop, but a sanctuary designed for his habitation. A place where the boundaries between the physical and the spiritual were thin enough to see through, and every creature that crossed his path seemed to wait for his recognition. There was a profound loneliness in the majesty, a silence that needed to be filled with the sound of a human voice. And as Adam walked through the glades, he began the monumental task of naming the life that surrounded him. Each name was a reflection of the creature's essence, a linguistic exercise of the authority he had been granted by the one who had fashioned him from the silt of the riverbank. The narrative tension builds as we realize that while Adam was the pinnacle of the physical creation, he was also a creature in search of a counterpart, a being who could share in the awe of the sunrise and the weight of the divine mandate. As the shadows lengthened across the lush landscape of the first afternoon, the story of Adam's creation reached its narrative zenith, setting the stage for the completion of the human family. You might like to share this video with someone who wonders about the profound dignity of our common ancestry. The geographical and cultural context of Adam's creation is further illuminated by the specific details provided in the biblical text concerning the location of Eden, placing it at the headwaters of 4 great rivers, including the Tigris and the Euphrates. This pinpointing of the cradle of civilization aligns with archaeological findings in Mesopotamia, where the earliest evidence of complex human society, agriculture, and written records emerges. The name Adam itself is a linguistic play on the Hebrew word Adama, ki, meaning ground or earth, reinforcing the historical memory of a localized, specific beginning for the human race in the Fertile Crescent. Furthermore, the concept of the image of God, or Imago Dei, was a radical departure from contemporary ancient beliefs. While other cultures viewed humans as slaves to the gods, the Genesis record presents Adam as a viceregent, a kingly figure tasked with the care of the world. This high view of human origins provided the moral and philosophical framework for the development of Western legal and ethical systems, emphasizing the inherent value of every individual based on their divine origin. Textual criticism reveals that the structure of the creation narrative is highly organized, using a Toledo formula that indicates it was intended to be read as a historical record of origins rather than a vague, poetic myth. The specificity of the elements, the dust, the breath, the rivers, and the naming segs is a witness-like quality to the tradition that was preserved with immense care through generations of oral and written transmission. By examining these historical markers, we move beyond the abstract and begin to see the story of Adam as the foundational pillar of the human identity. As the first day of human history drew to a close, Adam stood at the center of a world that was very good, a reflection of the perfection of its maker. And he understood that his existence was not an accident of the elements, but a deliberate act of love. The weight of his responsibility felt not like a burden, but like a crown, as he surveyed the kingdom of the earth and the vast, glittering expanse of the stars that began to appear in the darkening sky above the hills of Eden. There was a deep, resonant peace in the air, a sense of belonging that transcended the physical sensations of his skin and the rhythmic thumping of his heart. For he knew the voice of the one who walked in the garden in the cool of the day. Every breath he took was a gift, a constant reminder of the moment the divine had leaned over the red clay and whispered life into the stillness of the dust, creating a bond between the Creator and the created that could never be truly severed. This was the climax of the cosmic drama, the arrival of the observer, the gardener, and the friend for whom the entire universe had been prepared as a home and a temple. The story of Adam is our story. The narrative of a species that carries the dust of the earth in its veins and the breath of the Almighty in its spirit, forever searching for the home we first knew in the light of that first sunset. If this exploration of our beginnings has resonated with the depths of your own heart, please leave a comment with your thoughts on the mystery of our origin. In conclusion, the evidence for the creation of Adam as presented in the biblical record offers a profound synthesis of physical reality and theological depth that continues to challenge and inspire. The Bible clarifies that we are fearfully and wonderfully made, a sentiment that begins with the very first man fashioned from the Atama and infused with the Neshama, the divine breath. We have seen how the archaeological and cultural context of the ancient Near East provides a backdrop that validates the historical seriousness of the Genesis account, distinguishing it from the chaotic myths of surrounding nations. The chemical composition of our bodies serves as a silent witness to our origin in the dust, while our capacity for reason, language, and stewardship points toward the breath that sets us apart from the rest of the biological world. This documentary approach reveals that the creation of Adam is not merely a story for the Sunday school classroom, but a foundational historical claim that addresses the most fundamental questions of who we are and why we are here. The evidence suggests that we are the product of an intentional, artistic, and sovereign act. A masterpiece of clay and spirit designed for a purpose that spans from the soil of the earth to the throne of heaven. By grounding our understanding of humanity in this ancient record, we find a sense of dignity and destiny that is unshakable, rooted in the very moment that the first man opened his eyes to the glory of his Creator. The journey from the silent dust of the garden to the complex reality of our modern existence is a testament to the enduring power of the story of Adam, a narrative that remains the heartbeat of our collective identity. As we close this chapter on the first man, we are reminded that we each carry a spark of that original divine breath, a call to live with the dignity of those made in the image of the infinite. To stay connected with these deep dives into the evidence of our faith, please subscribe to our channel for more explorations of the ancient world.